Alright, people. So, there's not been a lot of boxing news coming out. Well, probably over the last week, there's not been a crazy amount of boxing news. I mean, the main talking points have been the Joshua Wilder thing. We're not quite sure what's happening there. And obviously the Fury and Ngannou press conference. Other than that, there's not been many fights. There is some fights on this weekend over in the States, which is good. It means we have something to watch. But in terms of like major fights news, we're in a bit of a lull. I want to say roundabout until kind of the end of September when we have Canelo versus Charlo, and then obviously we've Dan Aziz versus Joshua Buatsi the back end of October. Other than that, we're in a bit of a lull. So I don't want to be going, a day or two without uploading. You know me, I like keeping it consistent. I like doing midweek report on a Wednesday or a Thursday this week. And, I wasn't fancying doing a live. So I said I'd go on, boxing scene, see if there was anything that perked my interest. And there was an article here which they're reporting from an interview that Manuel Charr, he's quoted here in the article as being the WBA regular heavyweight champion, whatever that's worth. It's nothing really. But he's talking about Anthony Joshua, and Manuel Charr, in his opinion, he believes that Anthony Joshua is, and I quote here, mentally broken. I'll just get the article here in of itself. I'll quote what Manuel Charr says now in a second. But the article states as follows. There are ongoing discussions to make a January 2024 showdown between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. But Charr feels Joshua is not ready for such a fight after suffering consecutive defeats to unified champion Alexander Usyk. The British star bounced back in April with a 12-round win over Jermaine Franklin. He then returned in August and scored a brutal one-punch knockout over Robert Helenius. Charr believes Joshua has not been the same fighter mentally since suffering the knockout loss at the hands of Andy Ruiz in June of 2019. Joshua avenged the loss 6 months later with a dominant win. So that's what the article is saying. So Charr believes that Joshua, after the Ruiz loss, he's not been the same fighter. And to be honest with you, you could argue that that is legitimately true. Some people would actually go as far as saying that they noticed the change in Joshua as a fighter after the Klitschko fight, where he was a lot more circumspect about what he was doing in there. Obviously, it was a very tough fight, the Klitschko fight, but he didn't really turn into what we've seen in the last couple of fights since the Ruiz fight. Now, Charr gave an interview with Seconds Out. I'm going to quote him here directly. He says, and I quote, "Right now, Joshua is mentally broken. You can see that. Against Andy Ruiz Jr., when he first got knocked out, 2 losses against Alexander Usyk, he looks broken. He needs time. He's not ready for Fury," Charr explained to Seconds Out. "He needs 5 or 6 easy fights to get back to himself. If he fights Wilder next, he can stop boxing after that. He's not ready for Wilder or Fury, and not..." this tickles me here. and not ready for me. Really. That just tickled me there, that he would imply that, Joshua's not ready for Manuel Charr, right, really. I'll carry on reading here. If a fight with Wilder falls through, then Joshua is looking to fight again. In the month of December, Joshua's brother Eddie Hearn of Matchroom mentioned that Ruiz and unbeaten heavyweight prospect Filip Perkovic as potential opponents. For Charr, for his part, Charr reclaimed the WBA regular strap as part of a legal settlement with the WBA. He's already been ordered to make a mandatory defence against unbeaten contender Jarrell Big Farmer Miller, with their respective teams engaging in discussions to work out a date and location. That is the article in of itself, and that's the quote from Manuel Charr. He believes that Anthony Joshua is mentally broken and that he needs easy fights to basically bring himself back. Now, I agree with what he's saying there. I think with Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua, they talk so much about, and remember Joshua, he even posted that Instagram post not long after he fought Jermaine Franklin saying that he'd actually be out till December. I suspect that the plan all along was Wilder in December, making deals with the Saudis, and obviously they wanted to get the fight. They obviously thought it was going to be Dylan White, it was Helenius, and I suspect that since then, because Eddie Hearn's the promoter. He's not the one who has the final say on who Joshua fights. That's Joshua. Joshua is, although he's promoted and he's, under the Matchroom banner, he's a lot of freedom in terms of who he fights. Eddie Hearn could maybe say, "Oh, I'd like you to fight this guy," but it's not like Eddie Hearn is putting the gun to his head and saying, "Do it," right? It's Joshua who makes that decision. And I suspect Joshua himself knows, hang on a minute, I'm not ready for a Deontay Wilder. However, you've been saying it for the last couple of months, or certainly your team have, that, you know, it's Wilder next, Wilder next, Wilder next. Don't say that if you don't intend on going through with it. Now, if both guys do have the interim fight, you know, there's talks that Wilder's going to have one in November and that Joshua's going to have one in December, then as long as the fight happens next, you know, I'll be reasonably okay with it. If it's pretty much signed and sealed, I'll be reasonably okay with it. But what Charr's saying there about Joshua being, you know, mentally not the same, you can see that in Joshua. He's definitely not. I mean, his last two performances have not been good. He was afraid to throw any punches against Jermaine Franklin and Robert Helenius. Against Usyk, same thing, despite the fact, especially in the rematch, he talked it up that he knew, like, I got to go and put it on him, and he didn't at all in the second fight. You know, when he knew that boxing with this guy wasn't working, happened the first time, he got schooled, you go and do it again, and you get schooled again. Joshua needs a lot of work. He needs a lot of rehabilitation, and I think that rushing him, I'm putting my promoter's hat on, matchmaker's hat on here. Rushing him is a bad thing. But if you go and put your foot in it and you say you're going to rush him, well then, you know, you made your bed, you got to lie in it. If Joshua is looking for a comeback opponent, well, a rehabilitation opponent is a better word, or he has comeback fights, then I know Charr is saying there that Joshua was not ready for him. Ha ha ha. Yeah, that's real legit there. But honestly, if I was Eddie Hearn, I'd be looking at Manuel Charr. If I was a matchmaker with Joshua's team, I'd be saying, hang on a minute. I know he's got his, you know, quote-unquote mandatory, a big farmer Miller, but how much money do you think he's going to make for that? You know, I'm sure he'd chuck that title in the bin for a 7-figure payday, even if it was like 2 mil or something like that you'd give him. He'd probably chuck that belt in the trash, because who was Manuel Charr? Manuel Charr, even when he was in his prime, he's about, what, 40? I think that's how old Manuel Charr is now. I'll just check on BoxRec, because he's done virtually nothing over the last couple of years. Like, literally, he won that title. And again, it's only a regular strap. He won that against Ustinov back in 2017. I remember that. Okay, he's 38 years old. So he won that belt against Ustinov back in, 2017. He didn't fight then until 2021, where he took the O of then undefeated 19, and it was Christopher Lovejoy. So it wasn't really anything to write home about. If you've ever seen Christopher Lovejoy even train, you'll know that this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And if you've ever looked into his record, because remember, he was meant to fight Dave Allen on the undercard of Usyk Chisora a couple of years ago. And when you looked at the guy's record, you were like, hang on a minute, this record is dodgy as hell. I mean, there's so many debutants that you can't verify if he even fought them or not. So he took his O, for what it's worth, fought a guy who was 21-2, sounds good on paper, but I would imagine, yeah, that guy doesn't look particularly good at all. Who did he beat? Or he lost to Ali Darimza. I think he fought F.A. Jagba a few years ago, and his most recent win, which was December of last year, which was Manuel Charr's last win, he won in 2 rounds against Nuri Safiri, the younger brother. I think he's the younger brother anyway, or maybe he's the older brother, I'm not sure, of Sefa Safiri, the guy who Tyson Fury had his comeback fight against. And believe it or not, this guy, Nuri, is the inferior of the two, and Sefa Safiri ain't good. So that's who Charr's been feasting on over the last couple of years. To be honest with you, I know his record's 34-4. On paper, it's not terrible. Honestly, this is a step down from Robert Helenius. And some people will be saying, well, gee, you know, Eddie Hearn is talking about Hrgovic and stuff like that. Look, the way Hrgovic has been looking lately, he's not looked amazing. But at the end of the day, Joshua's face was in a pretty bad state after Robert Helenius. Robert Helenius wouldn't go. Well, Robert Helenius got knocked out in the round by Wilder. If Helenius was to fight, what's his name, Hrgovic, if he was to fight Hrgovic and Hrgovic turned up, that's not going no more than 3 rounds. I would be very wary putting Joshua in with Filip Hrgovic. Someone like Manuel Charr, if you could maybe do a step-aside deal with Big Pharma and try and sell it, like, cause that's what they try and do, sell it as a world title fight, even though it's a regular title. It will put Joshua in contention for a world title fight against Usyk, to be fair. Because obviously, you know, the WBA regular and super strap and all that jazz, all the nonsense with that. But that's a step down from Manuel Charr. Maybe that's what Joshua needs for a comeback fight, for one more rehabilitation fight where he can go in, look, or try to look devastating at least. Well, Charr, even in his prime, never had a great chin. I think he's been stopped a bunch of times. You know, Povetkin laid him out. Who else? He got laid out by Briedis with a big uppercut back in 2015. If you've never seen that fight, wonderful uppercut by Myris Briedis. That was a heavyweight, and he absolutely laid Manuel Charr out with that uppercut. So, and Joshua, and I think Manuel Charr has been knocked out a couple of times by the uppercut. So there you go. It's a punch to work on. So although what Charr is saying there is complete nonsense about him, Joshua not being ready for him, yeah, he's a step down from Hellenius. But if you're looking for a rehabilitation fight, that might be the fight Joshua needs. And that's why I'm doing a video, because it kind of, when I was reading it, I was like, stupid what he's saying. But that could be an opponent that you could put Joshua in there with, that he may look devastating early on against. Because Charr's never been durable. I know you could say Hellenius has never been durable either, which is fair, but at least Hellenius could punch. At least you could kind of look at Hellenius and say, alright, he's being cautious, too cautious, but Hellenius is a massive puncher. Charr never even had that. He never even had a punch in his prime, and Jesus Christ, he's well past it now. I mean, he is way further past his prime than Hellenius is. And Hellenius is past it, but Charr is just, I mean, against Lovejoy, who is as slow as molasses. I mean, Lovejoy is, when I saw that fight those two had 2 years ago, that guy is painfully slow, and he's as fat as a whale. And even then, Charr looked just as painfully slow. Now, Charr was never the quickest in his prime, but god damn, he slowed right down. So Joshua's going to have a completely easy target to hit. He won't be able to miss him. So surely someone like Charr, he could go in there and at least do a job on, and at least say, right, I feel like I can let the hands go again. I would imagine anyway. That's my thoughts on that. Let me know yours in the comment section below. What you think of Charr's comments that Joshua's mentally broken. He's not ready for Wilder. He's not ready for Fury. And that he's not ready for Manuel Charr himself. Disagree with that, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. Let me know your thoughts. I'll talk to these people. Peace.